Pete, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Pete Mortimer.
I'm Nick Rosen. Zach Barr.
Good job, guys.
Thanks.
So, this took a while to make, didn't it? How many years did you spend?
Years and years and years. 7 years.
Well, yeah, so it did. It actually, I feel like I've worked on that film as long as I've been making movies. I arrived here in 2006 and joined up with Pete, and he had this idea to make a film about somebody climbing, and so we started working on it way back when, and it was really convenient because Lynn Hill was my landlady. I was like, yeah, that works really well. But access, so gosh, and then, we make films every year. We have this thing, the Real Rock Film Tour that Pete founded, and it's annual climbing films up at, used to be here, and now it's up at Chautauqua. So we make films every year, and this was sort of in the background, and then it sort of took on its own life, and eventually became the main event over the last year.
How many feature films have you made?
Well, we made, I think this is probably our 5th feature film.
Nice work.
Thank you.
So, Lynn, what was it like back then?
Well, I actually have to say that I'm really happy that I started climbing 40 years ago. It's my 40th year of climbing.
Yeah.
I think it was, sometimes tough to suffer, but I think that's what makes us grow and makes it meaningful. And it was really a nice community, and I'm really glad to be a part of that in this film. They did a great job. People enjoy it. It's used really fast. It tells, the general story of the history. And I think that it was clever to pick just a few people. I mean, some people would say, certain people are missing in the history. You can't do complete history. All the details are going to be captivating and interesting. So I thought they did a great job. And I love the art, the photography, the clever visual stuff, because it was hard to tell a story of something that we didn't have footage. Like today's standard of HD, and they were dealing with a collection of so many photos and video. It was just a huge undertaking, and that's why it took so long.
So, I've got a question for the audience. How many people have been to Yosemite here? That's impressive. So we're going to do a Q&A. It might be hard to hear, so try to speak up. It's difficult to see up here.
There's also 2 microphones right by the stairs on either side.
There and there. So don't be shy if you run up to it, or just yell really loud.
Is anyone awake out there?
Yeah, we didn't, and we added movement to the old photos, not to the old film footage. So there was a third guy who was really instrumental in this whole project with us from the beginning, which is a guy named Barry Thompson, who's he just does the graphic animation, and he comes from an art background. He's really creative and out of the box and artistic, and so he's also been involved with this film for the whole process. And when we started, we really knew we wanted these 3 different generations, and we wanted each one to have its own look and feel that was appropriate to the time. And so we started with the with the stuff in the 60s, the 50s and 60s, and we just we go through and we work with all the photographers, and we get the archives, we get the high resolution stuff, and we sort of rough cut it in, and we just kind of patch it together, and then we give it to him. And sometimes the best stuff, we give him very little direction, and just he really kind of sits with it and thinks about it. Some of it was very back and forth. There were a couple where we found, the nice thing about the rock climbing is the environment hasn't changed that much. So we found the old photo, like there's one of the Lost Arrow spiral early in the film. And so we went back up there and we took a photo where the original was, and then we walked around the spire and went down to the ground. We basically photographed it from all these different angles, and then he put that into a 3D model, and then we could sort of fly around, and he adds the chalk dust and all that stuff.
Yeah, he basically cuts up the photo, the original photo, into layers, and then he adds new layers, like the chalk dust that he was mentioning, or the sun, the rays of the sun, the clouds, the birds, and then through those layers, he's then able to move the camera, so to speak, to move around the original image itself.
There's one shot, I won't belabor this too much, but there's one shot that I love, which is the first when that Bob Dylan song comes on, the first shot in Camp 4. And basically, there's a group of guys sitting around a picnic table by a big boulder, and you kind of fly through Camp 4. So that boulder it's an iconic boulder, it's sitting right there. So what he did is we brought him out to Yosemite, and he took a photo, he figured out the exact lens and the frame where that was, and then he just walked backwards through Camp 4, about 300 feet, taking photos every few feet, and then he just stitched that together, and so you could really get that feeling of flying through and then landing in this place.
Next.
I'm curious about one thing. I know that climbers had negative interactions with the National Park Service rangers, but did the filmmakers have any interesting interactions as well?
I'm just going to tell this story. So, yes, we did it. And in the end, it's actually been really positive, and there's actually, since this film is finished, the head ranger is a climber, and he's really making all these efforts to sort of bridge that gap. And they just declared in an Outside Magazine article that Valley Uprising was a work of...
I just say it's a documentary. We didn't need any permits to be there for the last 7 years, which is a good thing because we didn't have any. We're very pleased to read that.
And we just did a good project with them, and they've been so supportive. They're really supportive of the big Dawn Wall climb that just happened. So there's really a new leaf that's turning over. And one of the positive things in the park is that all the rangers have seen it, because we go over there and we talk to those guys. And I think the positive is they truly did not get how important this place is to climbers, and how passionate the climbers are, and how much history there is. And despite, we sort of, obviously this is a ballad, it's not a very even-handed documentary about what's going on. Despite that, I think it's actually made a lot of people up there appreciate just how passionate the climbers are and how important this place is. But the one story I want to tell is way back early, 6 years ago, we interviewed the PR person for the national parks, and we sort of convinced him that we were we weren't really climbers. It was before he knew us a little bit and stuff, and we just got him and we're just what about those nasty base jumpers? And he's said all this stuff, and he really I think he spoke out of line. He said everything as a documentary filmmaker you would want the Eagle National Park to say. And we were just he's a really nice guy. He's a friend of ours. We love him. We're like, oh my God, he just gave us all the ammunition for this. So we had an intern come in and put the film onto a hard drive and then back it up onto another hard drive. And then one day he was in our office and our computer just like had a malfunction. And all the hard drives, the original, the back, they were all killed. Simultaneously, we sent them to like day recovery places. We've lost the footage. We could never get it. And then by the time we asked him to do another interview, he was like on to us. Like, and so we never really got the range of your voice in the movie.
I mean, it was actually like 20 interviews. So a lot of the interviews in this film had to be like redone after we lost like a third of our interviews for the film.
And we fired
really great moment. Where's that intern? Kyle Compass. I know you're out there.
Yeah. We'll just post his name on Facebook.
Are you guys all climbers, or did you just kind of pick a subject that's interesting you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here in Boulder.
Can you repeat the question?
If we're climbers or if we just pick this subject. So we totally come at it from the climbing community. And I grew up here in Boulder. I started climbing and, as a kid. And so, yeah, I was a climber, 15 years before I started making films.
We're not quite as good as those guys.
Well, she is. Those guys.
Hey, I was wondering, Lynn, what was it like being one of the few women in climbing way back? I mean, there's a lot more women in climbing now, but you were kind of a pioneer. What was it like hanging out with all these guys, being, just a woman and all these guys around?
Well, I grew up in a large family with 4 brothers, and I liked being outside and climbing trees and stuff like that. I didn't know anything about rock climbing. There were no pictures of climbing until like 1974. Before I even climbed, I saw National Geographic. So I had one friend that I climbed a lot with. That was a woman, Marty Kingery. She's kind of shy. I think these guys tried to get her more involved in this project, but anyway, we climbed the nose back in 1979 together, and it was really important for me to have her around. And Beverly Johnson, who was in the credits, she was a role model for me. So there were a few important people in my life, and we kind of just were part of the group. And I think it was our passion that bonded us together, and it wasn't very judgmental as far as like, oh, you're a girl, or you're, we were just individuals. And I think that we respected each other, and just we were trying to live according to these ideals in our lifestyle, and kind of that gave us a lot of strength and connection. So I don't think it was like people might say, like, oh yeah, you're a girl in this male-dominated world. We were just climbers, and that's what Mario would say. The rock doesn't discriminate.
We have time for 2 more questions. In the back.
So how did you choose the narrative arcs to follow? Like I felt like it was really very well edited and sort of like really interesting sort of set of stories. How did you go about choosing those narratives to follow?
Well, as part of why it took us 7 years figuring that out. I mean, there's some obvious big stories. If you're a climber, you hear about these legends of like Robbins and Harding, or the plane crash, or the fight in the parking lot, with John Backer. And these are just the things that you hear as a climber. And it's cool because none of them had really been brought to film. They've been written about and stuff like that. But in general, finding this balance to have a 3-part film, each with its own little arc, and having that support kind of a broader arc, was a complicated film architecture. Pete and I, were just wasted. So there's it's crazy when you look back in the archives of our project files, and there's the versions of this film. There's hundreds of these versions, and we just tried everything.
One of the, I think, the last nut that we cracked, the last big structural nut was, something that isn't written in history, that is there was this real duality that we started seeing emerge, obviously with Robbins and Harding in the 60s, and then with Backer and, you know, I guess some of the other characters in the Stone Master era. And in the end, like, I think the last structural thing we did was really pick Honnold and Potter as our main characters to lead us through the modern section, to continue that spirit of this, you know, the great evolution is coming out of this one-upsmanship and this, these kind of battles for the king, you know, for the king, who's the king or the queen of Yosemite. And so I think once we sort of stuck to that, it's just, like Nick said, there's so many options, there's so many stories. And once we found that common theme and thread, it really helped us, like, I think just hone it in on what was fitting and what wasn't.
I guess I have more comment than question, but the rivalry between Harding and Robbins, that was my favorite part of the film. When Robbins really realized that, you know, that was so cool. And it reminded me of the municipalization thing, which Lynn, working so hard on Boulder municipalizing and having opposing forces. And Lynn came and helped us. That was so cool.
That's awesome. So, that's a cool announcement.
And then the other part, I've always, my name is Siegel, so flying is just like, that was really cool watching. Like, have these wing things on them too. And I just really like that part of it. And by the way, Nick, I'm your new neighbor.
Oh. All right, Siegel. Right, yeah.
Lynn's, I'm Lynn also, which means water. But I'm at 6th and Dewey, and you're my new neighbor.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I've been wanting to meet you, and my brother called me about this film.
That's so
Brad.
cool.
And he said, oh, this film. And I was going to go see Jeff Lowe's, which I am. But then I looked and, wow, it's Nick Rosen, my new neighbor.
Boulder's a really small place.
Yay, Boulder!
What's next?
Well, the next feature film, so we've been filming with the guys who did the Dawn Wall ascent that got so much publicity. And they've been working on that for years. And so we were there, we had a camera team up on the wall with them, and that'll be our next feature film. And, you know, we've got a TV series that we're doing out of Real Rock, and, you know, we've got a lot going on, but yeah.
Excited to see it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, guys.